Awesome. Thank you again, Dave, Tim, and the rest of the chapter colleagues for joining me today. And thank you for the opportunity for creating this workshop. This is our fourth and final workshop in the series of API security and legal risk management. This particular workshop is focused on API governance and the use of automation and intelligence for API governance. And in my biased opinion, this is the best among the four workshops that I believe. Um, Not because uh, there is a special content in this workshop, not only that, but also this brings all the thoughts together from the four, including this one, the fourth workshop that we are going to do. So this is going to be the culmination of all the thoughts we have, exchanged so far. So without further ado, let me walk you through the agenda. By the way, Tim and Dave, are you keeping track of people entering the Zoom room? Because I've hidden my controller so that I can see my screen more clearly. So hopefully somebody is monitoring as people join in.
I am. I've got the chat in the panelist or participant windows up.
Okay. Let me start by asking this question. How many of the attendees are coming back for the third workshop, or at least if you have attended one of these four workshop series? Just put some response in the Q&A. That would tell us whether I should repeat my bio or not. I think if everybody has part of the previous workshops, then I can skip that. Otherwise, I don't mind explaining some of my background so that they can relate it to the topic and the agenda that we have, and why we are so much passionate about this particular topic. But I'll skip it for the time being. I think, Dave, video recordings are still available for the third three workshops, and this is going to be available
They
as well.
are. Yeah, they are. And I'm actually dropping a link in the chat to where we have them up on the website. And we just had one person reply and say, apologizing, but that they have not had a chance to watch them yet.
Okay, all right. So if you're new joining this fourth workshop, I guess you will kind of see all the topics that I've covered in the first three workshops being revisited again um, in this workshop as well. But if you want to go read the topics in detail about, or watch the topics in detail on security and then the legal risk management, then you can watch the video recordings of the previous three workshops. But with this understanding in mind that you have some background about this workshop and also some introduction to API ecosystem, let's just continue with the agenda. I want to spend some time explaining this agenda and why I drafted this agenda the way it is. So the very first part of the workshop that I want to cover is, the enterprises that are experiencing the expansion of their API ecosystems. In my very first workshop, I covered what's happening at the global scale. I also touched upon what's happening within enterprises. Today, it is the same spirit, but I'm going to give you some real examples from very large scale enterprises, how their API enterprises look like today. What are the key ingredients? What are the pain points they're experiencing? And then in the second part of the workshop, halfway through, I will talk about what are some of the best practices that we understood working with various organizations, not necessarily the ones I'm giving as an example in this workshop, but the ones that are working with us. I know them, they know me, and also my team and other colleagues that I'm interacting with. So I'll share what are some of the best practices they are following to manage their APIs, to govern their APIs, what kind of controls they're putting in place. And then also, I will spend some time on how they and the other players in this ecosystem are using automation and intelligence better govern their APIs. So that's the part, the second part of the second half of the workshop. So in between, we will take some breaks. But today, I want to spend a little bit more time on interacting with the audience and asking them questions from two main perspectives, which is mentioned here. One is basically understanding from their perspective as an API consumer. So which is here, and also looking into some of these newer topics from a producer perspective. So the difference, of course, is when you're producing APIs, you have different challenges, you have different priorities, you have different goals, objectives. On the other hand, when you are consuming APIs, you may have completely different set of requirements and so on and so forth. So we'll look into in the last section of this workshop and inviting all of you to share your thoughts. And some of this will actually help you uh, position some new tools, some new processes, some controls within your organizations to better manage your APIs if you're already on that journey to build a process for API management. So without further ado, let's just get started with the first topic, which is expanding global enterprise API ecosystems with some examples. Before I go into the full details and give you some examples from enterprises, let's first define what does largest mean here, right? Largest could mean, does somebody have lots of APIs? Does somebody have a very large ecosystem that support the usage of APIs? Or the largest mean they're consuming a very large number of APIs? What does it mean? The very first list that you're seeing here is the list of enterprises that have very large enterprise ecosystem in the context of having API portfolios, having their own APIs and developer tools and integration platforms that are supporting the integrations of various products and services in their ecosystem. So if you look at this list, then Google GCP ecosystem is the largest, one of the largest. I do not necessarily have the ranking in terms of the APIs or in terms of the how much they're consuming. So the ranking is not based on that, but based on all this criteria defined together. You know, what's their API portfolio? What are the developer tools they support? What are the integration platforms? And so on and so forth. So Google, having its own cloud platform, GCP, and also having their own API management product, APG, they are probably one of the largest API ecosystems in the world. And you can imagine how and why. They have thousands of APIs in the cloud. They have analytics related to APIs. They have map services. They have payment gateways, and much, much more than that. They also provide their own API management system. So you can also see their customers' APIs as also part of their ecosystem. So no doubt in my mind, they are one of the largest API ecosystems. If you go down this list, then it is Microsoft, Amazon, Meta, or Facebook, Salesforce, Stripe, surprisingly, Oracle, IBM, SAP, Twilio. And some of this might surprise you. For example, Stripe, not very big company compared to Google or Microsoft, but they have one of the largest API ecosystem. Why? Because they are truly a SaaS company enabling payment processing globally, essentially through an ecosystem of APIs. Similarly, if you look at Twilio, essentially supports APIs that provide SMS functionality, voice, videos, customer engagement, and so on and so forth. So they have one of the largest API ecosystems. At least I see them in the top 10. Uh, Oracle, which was a bit of surprised element here, has not taken off into the cloud ecosystem the way Google or Microsoft has done, and that's why we can see not being in the top three. But again, in full disclosure, these are subjective rankings. These are my rankings. Your rankings could be different. But again, this is based on the definition of largest, which means extensive API portfolios, developer tools, and integration. Now, let me share with you another aspect of largest API ecosystem. Okay, and that is based on those API ecosystems and the corresponding companies that are enabling others to automate their processes, to build new innovations, to provide seamless integrations to various products and services around the globe. So if we choose that as a criteria, then the ranking changes slightly. Google still remains at the top. But then guess what? OpenAI shows up here in one of the top in the top of this list. Why? They may not necessarily have lots of APIs. They may have a handful of APIs. But now, with the accelerated usage of artificial intelligence solutions, the ability to process natural languages and provide various generative AI capabilities by using these large language models. And that explains why OpenAPI ranks on this list. Why? Because they provide APIs that seem to be attracting a lot of attention. Um, uh, Whoever basically wants to use or build upon some AI use cases. So NLP, AI, content generation, because of those specific reasons, are also including code generation that I've listed here, code generation. OpenAI API ecosystem is perhaps one of the largest in the world. Similarly, Stripe, which was again on this list here, but again now it has gone up in the list. Why? Because of the integrations and the empowerment they provide to other organizations for payment processing. Meta still remains at the fourth place. AWS is again come down because AWS, I would see them as more cloud enablement APIs, provisioning assets, provisioning systems, uh, memory, CPUs, and things like that. So basically providing those capabilities. Azure definitely with their AI-driven API ecosystem that they have developed, upon which a lot of companies are building their applications now, has indeed jumped in this list here. Similarly, Twitter. Now, Twitter does not necessarily have one of the largest API ecosystem based on this previous definition. But in terms of the usage, Twitter shows up here on this list. Why? You can imagine all the sentiment analysis, all the product reviews, all the understanding of the markets. Twitter, which is one of the largest social media platforms, enables those applications and services. And Twitter API in this context is a very useful API. So again, Twitter does not show up on this list, but then shows up on this list. Salesforce again, PayPal, another surprising element here, Zoom Info, another organization that basically enables businesses by enriching the company specific information. They provide sales intelligence. So the summary of these two lists that I've been sharing with you is to underscore two main points. what are the companies that are providing these largest ecosystems, either from a producer perspective or a consumer perspective, or enabling other organizations to consume their partner APIs or their APIs and build products and services. Now let's look into some of the individual use cases. Okay. And this time, I do not necessarily want to choose these companies. I want to choose a representation of companies in various industries. One of them is eBay's. Now, you must be wondering, why did I choose eBay? I was attending a workshop almost 3, 4 years ago, and I met this lady, and I guess she was just giving a talk, and according to her, they had one of the largest API ecosystem because of the partner enablement they needed to achieve. All the listing management that needs to happen, all the items, inventories that people are searching, the partners that need to integrate with their sales pipelines or shipping products from their online stores to their consumers. So that's their main key functions, why they build these APIs. If you go look at their technology, they are primarily REST APIs, but they have some legacy SOAP APIs as well. They are doing this essentially to enable developers. Essentially, developers register on their API platform. They can test with those APIs, and then they can build innovations integrating the eBay APIs into their systems. And one way for them to control their access of their APIs is to use a platform where they can rate limit the API usage. According to the publicly available statistics, on average, they can support 5,000 to 1.5 million calls per day, right? And of course, this number may be a bit old, but this is with approval. So how many calls that they deny could be another story. In terms of security, they have enabled OAuth authentication, API keys, compliance that needs to be compliant with eBay policies. Um, and they also have affiliate programs. The partners need to use these APIs to enable various products and services they have. So partner integration is very, very important to them. Another interesting case study, Coca-Cola. You must be wondering again, why did I choose Coca-Cola? One of the reasons I chose Coca-Cola was the diversity of their ecosystem. They are not necessarily a software company, but perhaps they are one of the largest software consumers or enablers in the world. They have to enable all these mobile apps, IoT devices, point of sales, and all these APIs, they need to make sure are secure, compliant, quality of services maintained to enable all the services they provide in their entire ecosystem. And they use multiple platforms to manage their APIs. MuleSoft is one of them. Microsoft Azure is another one. More recently, they have partnered with Microsoft to leverage upon Azure's AI capabilities. This is a publicly available information. I provided a link here. You guys can go click and read the press release by Coca-Cola. They have signed a 1.1 billion contract with Microsoft to enable the AI and digitization effort. I would say mainly AI, because they want to leverage upon the speech intelligence, the large language model to understand the natural languages better, to interpret the orders better, to fulfill the orders better or in a better way. So they're leveraging upon all this. Overall, their ecosystem is so diverse that you can measure by this fact that they have 250 bottling partners around this globe. And those partners have maybe thousands of other parameters uh, that they need uh, in an operational mode using those APIs in their ecosystem. Nobody can doubt the global reach or the business impact that Coca-Cola has pretty much every corner of this planet. No matter where you go, you find Coke. So all of this, somewhere, somehow, API enable that empowerment. I chose another industry, this time completely different, pharmaceutical or drug industry or whatever way you want to call that, Pfizer's global API ecosystem. Now, there is not a lot of information available about their APIs publicly. I couldn't find out how many APIs they have. For example, I could see eBay has in the order of thousands of APIs, or at least in the high hundreds. Similarly, Google, Microsoft, all those have hundreds and thousands of APIs. But I couldn't see how much and how many APIs Pfizer has, because many of those are essentially not private. They are not public APIs. They are more private, enabling their internal partners to exchange the data, inventory information, healthcare information, working with their pharmaceutical partners, manufacturing and R&D facilities that they have all around the globe. But again, a very important industry, very important company in that industry, enabling digital services through APIs. Okay, this is the second last. So now Apple. Once again, I didn't choose Google, I chose Apple. Well, obviously, the reason was they do not necessarily have a closed or open ecosystem. They have a very, it's not like Android ecosystem where anybody could develop whatever application they want. They have a more controlled environment, but still they have thousands or hundreds of APIs through which they enable various services. But the difference between this API and many of the APIs that I've seen or listed here as from those companies, either Pfizer or Coke, these are more device specific APIs. Think of them as more like IoT specific systems. So enabling their operating systems, iPads, watches, TVs, and vision glasses, and they have public and publicly available APIs as well, because the iOS development community depends on those APIs, build and integrate various products and services. They also have various AI-driven APIs they have started to use, or as a matter of fact, perhaps on the innovation front, they are no less than any other company in the world. So we see the business APIs enabling commerce, sales, financing, reporting, global pricing, and availability of their inventory across these different markets. This is the last one. Once again, very interesting example. John Deere. Everybody knows John Deere. One of the largest agriculture equipment manufacturing company, not just manufacture, but also the services company. So they pivoted into the services model not very long ago, but I'm not expert in agriculture specific analytics. But what I know is they have a lot of innovation that is happening in the agriculture space through their APIs. They have APIs that share weather information. They have APIs that share machine information. They have APIs that share information, uh, the productivity in various farms around the globe where they empower those farmers and the corporations with various machines. So you have machine analytics, you have weather analytics, you have crop analytics. So they empower a very large ecosystem through their APIs. Third-party API integration is very, very important piece. And also, I believe, to the best of my understanding, they're also looking into monetization aspect. Let me give you a thought. A farmer who has a John Deere machinery on his or her farm, who owns the data? Is it John Deere? Is it them or somebody else? Um, could it be both? Could it be a monetization opportunity for them to sell their data and help other farmers leverage upon the machine data and the agriculture data or the yield data that could help them improve with the precision agriculture. So these APIs that John Deere empowers is not only transforming the agriculture industry on a industrial scale, but also giving new business models for people to consider. So in summary, I guess this is one of the off slides. I didn't beautify it, but in summary, if you look at all these examples that I shared with you, they have a story. They have a story in which the prime factor is why they're building those APIs. What's their use case? And then once they have those APIs, how they're growing the ecosystem, who are their partners, who are their customers, how they're leveraging upon AI, how they are empowering the developer community to use their APIs in a seamless way, because they're not building APIs for themselves, right? They want people to depend. They want other enterprises to depend on their APIs so that they can grow the ecosystem and perhaps revenue and digitization opportunity. But this also creates a lot of challenges to enterprises. Either it's John Deere, either it's Google, or it's Apple. And this is one of my favorite slides. And that's why I said recall, because I've used this throughout my workshop, in my first workshop, in my second workshop, in third workshop. The reason why I recall this particular slide is, think about what the enterprise ecosystem looks like. There are APIs, there are different stakeholders, they have to support different tools, they have to provide automation, they have to provide licensing management solutions. You're consuming APIs, you're producing APIs. So this is a very complex enterprise API ecosystem. But if we can summarize in few keywords, then those keywords will be use cases. What are the use cases? Why these APIs are built to begin with? The underlying business cases, the technological reasons. There is not always the monetization that is a driving factor. There could also be partners who are driving this because they don't want your GUI. They don't not want your dashboards loaded with heavy, graphics and all that. All they want is your intelligence. And the way to deliver that intelligence is through those APIs. All they need is your data, which APIs can provide, which you can embed in your workflow and in dashboard. So in theory, these use cases could be driven by many, many factors. Then on top of that, you have a platform to manage APIs, to manage your users, to manage their accounts, to rate limit their usage, and so on and so forth. So security is also very much part of that. The global reach, the supply chain they support, the digitization effort they have, and what they're leveraging upon with the more modern and newer technologies like artificial intelligence. Who they collaborate with, why they need to collaborate with. Is it the monetization, or is it also the partner enablement? What impact they have on their ecosystem. Okay, it's not just an API, which seems like a simple idea, but once you build an ecosystem and partner depends on them, this creates a seed that leads to other innovations in that ecosystem. So what impact they're having in their ecosystem, how they are enabling these partner integrations, what are the kinds of developer tools they're supporting, how easy it is for somebody to read their documentation and integrate their APIs into their workflows, and most importantly, how they're managing those, how they're providing automation. So this very complex API, enterprise API ecosystem can be summarized in very few keywords that I've listed here. So let's summarize based on these 2 or 3 slides that I've have in here in 3 keywords, which is invisibility, usability, scalability, in terms of summarizing the challenges of these enterprises. Okay, so let me explain the invisibility part. So the invisibility is when you have too many APIs, when you have too many partners, when you have too many customers, you're building many, many APIs. But it's not unlikely that you don't even know all those APIs that are being built for various reasons. This is a topic I go into greater detail because, from a governance point, invisibility is a problem that poses various challenges to governance. But at the same time, you also have usability issue. Why? Because you, being a very large enterprise that has global presence, you have various business units. Those business units have various teams. They have various requirements for using those APIs. Maybe they're buying or purchasing APIs from various vendors. So do they have one account? They have hundreds of accounts. How do they manage those? Consumer. Maybe they have a portal for their own internal APIs that they want to monetize or they want their partners to use. But what about the consumer part of it? Also, they have various kinds of tools that they need to streamline. They want to make sure that the security is tight enough upon which they can meet all their appliance goals that are listed here. So scalability becomes an issue as an enterprise challenge. So let's look into what are some of the business risks that enterprises are facing when they are leveraging upon APIs either to monetize their asset or to digitize their assets. Okay, or it could be both. And I see API as a unit towards that goal. So let's look into that. It's fairly easy for us to understand these API business risks can be classified into five main categories: legal, reputational, financial, operational, and regulatory. Okay, let me go into those risks in a little bit more detail. So, the legal risk is when you have a threat that arises because your organization fails to comply with the contractual terms and legal obligations that other partners enforce upon you. This is mainly applicable when you're consuming APIs. And this is challenging because those APIs could be in hundreds and thousands, enabling various business units, various products and services. And maybe there is a redundancy problem as well. So, in summary, threat that arises because of you not complying with those contractual terms is your legal risk. So that could lead to penalties, court fees, or other kinds of legal expenses. Uh, and this arises mainly because of three reasons. You misunderstood API agreements, or you were depending on a Joe developer's flawed agreement. You thought this is what they mean, but without a proper due diligence, you end up consuming certain APIs that basically throw you off for your legal compliance. Or there might be deliberated violations within your teams for whatever reasons, inside the thread or whatever it is. Reputational risk is that threat when your organization's public image is distorted or, in worst scenario, destroyed. And that could happen for various reasons. One of the reasons could be you may have an API, which is very important, upon which your partners depend, and authentication is broken. Anybody could sign in, anybody could access that API. And the worst thing is that API is leaking your customer information. Imagine what happens to your reputation that you're not able to secure just one door in your house or one window. Imagine the entire house's security and compliance aspect. House being an enterprise ecosystem. And also, you may have certain attacks that are happening on you that you're not able to handle. Maybe somebody just launched a denial of service attack to one of your APIs, which didn't have rate limits on it. Simple thing, right? So not because you didn't secure your API, but you just forgot to put a limit on how many times somebody can call your API. If there was no rate limit, somebody could exploit that weakness and basically bring your API server down. And that, that impacts your ecosystem. And even if your API goes down for a few days, but this could impact your partners and customers. And I've seen I've heard many stories and listened firsthand to some of our customers and partners who have shared similar experiences. Or in a worse situation, you do not have a best practices in place where your API user credentials are stolen very easily, leading to identity theft, and somebody's using somebody's keys, and you couldn't protect it, which damages your reputation as well. So these incidents could lead to reputational risk, but ultimately they may cause financial losses as well, because you may have a larger churn. Your reputation is damaged, so you are having difficulty signing new customers, or your existing customers leave, and other situations may arise. The financial risk is a direct monetary loss threat, which can have impact on your bottom line, and this could basically result in loss of direct revenue. You know, in several examples I provided in the past, when in previous workshops, where I talked about either it's a social media API or it's a partner enablement API, but any of those, if they are not directly transacting dollar value, but they could still have impact on your financials. Because if one of those APIs are actually enabling your monetization efforts, then essentially it leads to financial losses as well. So if they are not directly shut down, to, let's say, uh, if this was a, credit transaction API, if it goes down, you have financial loss immediately, but also could impact on your profitability, uh, your growth prospect, and essentially damage relationship with your partners who depend on you for various enablements. Operational risk is that threat that affects an organization's information systems simply because of inefficient IT infrastructure. So you have certain APIs that are not necessarily compromised, but they are built not to scale, and they bring down your entire ecosystem down. Okay, so you do not necessarily have a direct security or data breach, but they have a long-term impact on you simply because you had an API that was inefficient. So either somebody could just not knock down the or bring the server down, or basically cause the server to delay certain responses because you are simply dominating the server's request queue, and basically the server is not able to respond timely with to certain resources, and which leads to various issues. This is the last risk that you may face because of your API ecosystem, and this arises when organizations fail to comply with various applicable laws. So here, this is not necessarily you are violating the terms of services or privacy statements of organizations, but maybe you are violating the laws of the land. Maybe you are not supposed to reveal a specific piece of information that you end up revealing through APIs, and you violated certain laws. Maybe you have an API that is hosted maybe in Europe, but that's storing US citizens' information. You thought that this is just an API, but underlying it is storing some sign-on credentials, again, private information, and which violates the certain privacy laws in the US. So there could be n number of reasons through which you may end up violating these laws and having uh, various problems in launching your products and services, maybe also paying penalties or fines, or leading to the damaged reputation, or just missing the deadlines in launching certain products and services. So far, what I've covered is what are some of the enterprise challenges from various risk perspective. But now let me talk about where this risk comes from, because this workshop was all about APIs. So they must come from either because you built APIs that your partners consumes, or you're consuming APIs that you have uh, integrated with your products and services. But ultimately, it's all about APIs, right? So let me share some thoughts on what are the underlying problems per se with these APIs that actually causes all these business risks that we review. But before I go there, let me take a quick pause here and see if anybody has any question. Any questions in the chat window, Dave?
We don't have any in the chat, but if anybody does have any questions and you want to throw something out now, feel free. Please drop it in the chat and can relay it through. But as of right now, we are current.
Right. And time-wise, we are good on time. I had blocked 45 minutes for this section, so we are a little bit late, like maybe a few minutes, but I think we will recover that. So let me talk about where is this problem coming from? Where are all these financial problems or the legal problems or the operational inefficiencies come from in terms of the APIs? Let me recall this slide again, invisibility problem. Okay, you have a complex API ecosystem, you have hundreds and perhaps thousands of APIs, which brings this invisibility. And let me explain where is this invisibility coming from. This invisibility into your API ecosystem comes from four basic types of APIs. And those are shadow APIs, zombie APIs, rogue APIs, legitimate but unknown APIs. Let me explain one by one each one of those. Shadow APIs are those undocumented APIs that were created and deployed without a formal approval in place, right? So how could this happen? Well, maybe a developer was just doing some tests. He wanted to see, oh, can I integrate this particular API into this particular product because that saves us some time. Didn't seek a formal approval from the product owner or the scrum master or whoever the role is being played by, and end up adding an API into the ecosystem that was not formally documented and actually approved by through a formal approval process. Zombie APIs are those outdated or deprecated APIs that remain active within your system. So they may have been active at some point in time, but somehow your product has evolved. You have built new products and services. You have signed up new customers. So you have moved them to a new platform or something like that happened, which led to some of the outdated APIs that you forgot to shut down or deprecate. So that leads to dangling or zombie APIs that are somehow in your ecosystem waiting to be exploited because either your underlying technology you have moved when you moved your customers or your products and services. So these API remains there like a zombie APIs, which can be exploited for various unforeseen reasons. Rogue APIs are those unauthorized APIs that are created with malicious intent to begin with. Now, it could be an insider threat, or it could be somebody downloaded a open source library or a third party library that actually had this rogue API already part of that ecosystem or part of that application. It's not unheard of that hackers or bad actors have exploited open ecosystems to exploit application stacks. And it's possible that this unauthorized API got into your system maliciously through one of the insider threats or somebody who was external, but waiting to exploit your ecosystem. The fourth type of API is unfortunately a officially sanctioned API, but not properly documented. Okay, so somebody gave the approval. Okay, go ahead, build this API because our customer XYZ needs it by quarter 1. And then the engineering team or the product team is on it. But guess what? They simply forget to document it because they were on a faster cycle. They delivered it in an agile manner. It's not unheard of that the documentation is not complete. But also, what is not impossible is that they completely forgot to document this API, even just to record the endpoint and how to authenticate this API and so on and so forth. So, although there was a official mandate to build this API, but it goes away somewhere, inside your ecosystem. Nobody knows that exists, and unfortunately, this is simply a problem of a legitimate API, but undocumented, unknown API. So hopefully, this gave you good understanding about what are the various ways our API management could fall apart because we don't even know these APIs exist, right? If we don't know, we cannot manage, we cannot govern. So that is the first governance challenge that we have to address. Find APIs, document them, catalog them, categorize them. And this all helps us with governance, building policies that will help us put control on those APIs. So now we are in the second part of the this first slot. Now let me talk about the foundations of API governance. I think you understood from the examples of Google API ecosystem, eBay API ecosystem, Coca-Cola API ecosystem, the use cases, why they're building APIs, why they're using specific types of tools and technologies to build those APIs, SOAP, REST, and whatnot, and also looking into some unknown cases of APIs that could pose to governance. But let's look into what does API governance mean? And if I can ask the audience, what does API governance mean to you? If you have experience working with API management tools, or you are one of the product owners, or if you are the auditor, you are responsible for putting a due diligence process inside your team, part of the open source team or part of the API management team, whatever it is. So share your thoughts through the chat window. But my question is very simple. The answer may not that be simple, but what is API governance?
Well, it's possibly do where people get their hands and allow them to speak if they want to.
Tim, your voice was very faint.
Yeah, it was hard to hear you, Tim.
See, it's if possible, since we have a small group, it might make sense to, let people raise their hand if they'd like to talk. Speak.
Your audio is breaking up.
That's okay. If you can briefly put in the chat, we maybe Dave can help us understand. Read that. But anyways, I guess while Tim is writing or figuring out his microphone problem, to be honest, I must admit that this is indeed a very complex topic. If you just simply Google it, you will see lots of products talking about API governance. You will see the list of items they list under API governance. You will see what they need to do to put API governance in place. There is a lot of confusion in the market, not only in understanding, but also what tools can support API governance. Am I missing anything if I choose this particular tool? And do I have a blind spot in my processes when I put API governance in place? So all those are very legitimate questions. But guess what? Today, I'm going to simplify this in the simplest possible way. And to me, API governance is a combination of two words: analytics, actions. Now, it's very philosophical. You may laugh. How can I just simplify this by saying that analytics and actions? But truly, that's what it is. That's what API governance is all about. Collect API analytics. Once you have that visibility about various analytics from usage perspective, from the inventory itself perspective, you have certain actions on your list that you can put in place, which provides a beginning of API governance process in your organization. So to me, once again, the API governance equates to analytics and actions. So now you must be wondering what kind of analytics I'm talking about. So the rest of the next few slides is all about that.
Yeah. Bolje, while you were sharing that, Robert had posted in the chat, API governance sets rules to ensure APIs are secure, consistent, and meet organizational needs that are provable.
That's a very good example. I'm gonna steal that. I'm gonna steal that definition. It's a very good description. But that is in no way contradiction to what you just answered or defined what API governance means. Ultimately, it comes down to collecting analytics and putting some action plan on the ground that secures your APIs, make sure you are compliant, make sure your usage of the APIs is compliant and consistent with whatever your business policies might be. So everybody may have their own definition, but by no means, we are trying to simplify this. But let me answer this question that this is all about collecting analytics and actions. So let me talk about what kind of analytics that we need to put the API governance in place. This is the list of 10 top analytics that I have identified as the basis for API governance. If you have these analytics, you can put one of the best API governance process in place in your organization. Now, of course, you might need various tools, various people with various skills and also processes to put in place. But again, these are the top 10 API analytics you would need no matter what you do. In some cases, some analytics immediately, in some cases, some analytics later. But again, this is a continuously improving process. API governance is about, a constant improvement. Let me take a quick pause. Was Tim able to write the question, or Tim, are you able to repeat your question again? I see your audio on.
Saying is, since you wanted audience input, maybe since it's a small group, they could raise their hand and actually speak, so you could have more interaction.
That's good. I got the bits and pieces of that, but I understood. You talked about actions, you talked about, putting some controls in there as a governance process. That's what it is. So let me walk you through these analytics. What does these analytics mean? The very first one, API inventory. API inventory is all about discovering your APIs, finding your APIs. What are those APIs? When I say API inventory, I also mean the vendor, the endpoint, how do you call them, authentication details, and all that. So that's all, finding the inventory and the underlying pieces of information related to those APIs. The second piece is category. So finding the categories of your APIs. Why this is important? Well, not every product is same. APIs are very much like products, right? Some is weather API, some is your OpenAI API, which brings intelligence to you. So they have different use cases. So they are very much like products. However, they do different things. And because they do different things, you need different kinds of policies to govern them. So if you are able to identify the underlying categories, you will be able to do a favor to yourself, because then you can build your policies for various types of categories of APIs. You may have you, I mean, if in an ideal world, you may have a policy for each of those APIs, but if your inventory is in hundreds and thousands, it may become a practical issue. So you may want to lump certain types of APIs under one category and say, look, these are the policies, either from a consumer point or from a producer point for these APIs, these groups of APIs. And these are the APIs that are AI driven or whatever it is. So they are governed by different sets of policies. So categorization helps you formulate governance policies that you need to put in place. Age of the API, how old this API is. Recall my problem of deprecated APIs. So finding how old this API is, who's using it, when did we build it, why this is still on. So all those questions related to the specific age of the API becomes very important. What does this API do? This is different than asking what is the category of API? This is basically the technical functionality of the API. And recall again my problem. If you want to enforce certain controls, let's say for GDPR compliance perspective, does this API transact PII? Does it transact financial information? So knowing what is the under technical functionality of those API, will help you govern those APIs in a more systematic way. The next one, API vulnerabilities. Know what are the weaknesses in your APIs. Like every other product in the world, I'm sure everybody's familiar with, CI/CD pipelines, how products evolve, they are introduced bugs. We need to fix those bugs. APIs are no different. It is also the case when you have hundreds and thousands of APIs, you have issues to the same scale. And to the development team or the engineering team, it is not possible for them to fix them on day one. So you have to prioritize. So having the vulnerabilities and known vulnerabilities that you can prioritize, you mitigate your risk one by one. You see, okay, these APIs are this is authentication specific weakness. This is something we should fix right away, because this is authenticating API which is having our credit card transaction specific, or this is dealing with customers' data. So if our authentication authorization is broken, that's no good. We must address it. Quality of the API. When I say quality is different than function and inventory and categories, all of that. Why? Because that tells you how scalable this API might be. Okay, so if you are eBay, if you have hundreds and thousands of partners using your API, it needs to scale. Maybe your partners may call your API 100 times per minute. Okay, so can it scale? Do you have the infrastructure to scale? So what is the quality of API? If I call this API today, if I call 5 hours ago, do I have the same response time? Right? So quality, measuring the quality of API becomes very important. Trust. Can you build trust in your APIs? Okay. Now, trust is very subjective term. If it's a Google APIs, even if it's a crappy API, perhaps there is some trust just because there is a brand. If it's a Joe developer, could be the best API, but may have a less trust because it's a Joe developer. Nothing against the Joe developer, but again, it's a branding, right? So how do you measure that trust? Licensing. If you're consuming APIs, let's say Google APIs, do I understand their terms of service? Maybe they are giving me 100 free calls, but 110th call is not free. Do I have a subscription in place? Maybe they're not shutting down my usage right now because they do not want to disrupt my products. They understand that. Sometimes we may go over the limits, but you do not want to wait until a year when they send you $1 million bill and you're not able to pay that bill. right? So understand API licensing terms and conditions. And same goes for you as a producer too. When you are building your APIs, you are providing terms of services, be transparent, be open. Don't shut down startups who might be building or using your APIs upon your APIs to build new innovations. Maybe that's competing with you, but again, you have a strategy to deal with those situations. API risk I already talked about, and you have those risks from business perspective, from ecosystem perspective, from financial obligation perspective, and whatnot. Last but not the least, API health, which can be measured in many, many different ways. It's not necessarily the quality, it is the health. Uh, is it available today? If it shuts down for the next 2 days, what's the value? It scales, it's very fast, but it doesn't work all the time. So, you have to have all these analytics that will help you formulate policies for various purposes to put controls for your API governance purposes. At the end of the day, you need all of this. Dave, you have a question?
Not a question. Just Robert had also dropped this note in the chat, and I just wanted to share it with you. Sadly, most will not deprecate APIs. Remember, most companies don't even believe they can even manage offboarding users. Last number I read was 17% who thought they could. APIs are a massive hole in security in most cases. Just to comment, these are real issues.
And that's a very rich comment, I must say that. And I see similar stories as well. But that is not to say that you cannot put certain policies in place to deprecate those. It is very true. Once your APIs get entangled into your partners and customers' ecosystem, it is very difficult to pull this back, unless until you, excuse my language, piss off some of your customers. It's very difficult. You are absolutely right. But I've seen practices like giving warnings. Okay, we are going to deprecate this API by this date. Then they give another round. Then they give another round. So a lot of organizations that are truly doing the best they can, they do these things to make sure that. But I've seen with Google as well. They shut down certain APIs and they say, we will no longer support this API by this date, and so on and so forth. So you are absolutely right. This is very difficult issue, but again, from your internal DevOps good reasons purposes, you have to take this tough call. Otherwise, these less used, ignored APIs become a problem for API governance moving forward. Maybe security threat, maybe a breach. Difficult issue, but again, sooner or later you have to deal with it. Now, I said that API governance is all about analytics, actions. I spoke about analytics. Let me talk about actions now. What actions an enterprise needs to put an API governance in place? Once again, top 8 list that is listed here. Let me go through them one by one. The very first thing is, politics. It starts from there, and generally, you have to establish teams. You need to have a governance body. I'm not saying that how many people are on this board, but it could be just one single guy who takes the ownership, and that is the board. But you need to have somebody act as a board. You need to have that ownership rest with somebody to manage this. Otherwise, it is unmanageable. However, you need to have this individual or group of individuals empowered enough and given enough freedom and resources to operate the rest of the actions that I'm going to talk about. If you have a body, but no plan or no resources on the ground, there is no API governance, right? So let me talk about with this assumption that you have a body in place, API governance body, what are the different actions you need? Next one, you need to have a somehow centralized documentation in place. Okay, you may have hundreds of developers or even 2 developers or 10 developers, but there is no reason you should not have a documentation. Okay. Every time you have, this could be very much part of your approval process. Okay, we need to build this API by this time because this customer needs this integration and this is the way to do it. Or we need to consume this particular OpenAI API into our chatbot application because we are not doing our own AI research. Why do this when we can afford to buy a $50 subscription and just replace our internal systems with that particular API call? There are a number of reasons, but you need to have a documentation in place. This is very much similar to having a documentation in place for any products that you build internally, externally, or bring them on board. Then the other action you need to put in place is conduct regular reviews, and you need to have approval process in place. Okay, that's another action you need to put in place. The fourth one is manage inventory and catalog. Okay, in many ways, if you're putting documentation in place, if you're conducting reviews, you're lucky. If not, you will have a inventory in place already. You may have some understanding about which APIs are there, what do they do, so you have a way to catalog them. Okay. I'm not saying that how do you catalog them? You can catalog them by vendors, you could catalog them by product usage, you could catalog them by business units, you could catalog them by sensitivity of the data they provide. N number of ways are there for you to catalog them, but you need to have inventory management system in place. It could be a manual process, or it could be a very sophisticated dashboard. Doesn't really matter, but you need to have an inventory in place. When you have the governing body, don't just trust that everything will start to roll once you kick in these three items that I mentioned before: your documentation, your approval process, and inventory. You still need to coordinate the communication and collaboration between stakeholders. Engineering team may not talk with the product team. They may not talk with the sales team. The sales team is selling the product, but the prospects are saying, okay, we're not going to buy it because you don't have these 3 APIs that we need before we buy your product. But the sales guy actually don't know the product team already has this on the roadmap, right? So the mismatch of communication. Or as a matter of fact, one of your partners is almost ready to leave, or customers are almost ready to leave because they did not know this. This integration is possible because there is a coordination, there is a gap in your communication between different teams. So as a governing body, you still need to facilitate this communication between different stakeholders, internal, external. You define it. Who talks to who. Is there a spoke for each of those entities? Doesn't really matter, but you need to coordinate that collaboration. Assign people with responsibilities. Once again, this is not a matter of one person, 2 people, 3 people. Maybe one person assumes multiple roles, but you need to have various components of your governance process in place. And then each one of, for example, this could be very much a role for documentation. This could be a very much a role for conducting reviews and audits. This could be a very much a role, the person that manages the inventory. But each of those, you need to have ownership. So once you assign those ownerships, then you can help people accountable. Okay, so you need to have this ownership, empower those people, have an empathy for them, give them a runway, and then you're putting a nice governance in place for managing your APIs. And again, this never stops. You always have to look for continuous improvements. Okay, in improvements in documentation, new person comes on board, they are not necessarily aware of that, you miss the training part. Okay, so that's very much part of your continuous process. Last but not the least, enforce compliance and security. So this could very much rest with the conducting reviews and approvals. The team that is responsible for approvals can also be responsible for regular audits, quarterly audits, yearly audits, or whatever the frequency might be, to make sure that whatever processes that you put in place, whatever policies that people are supposed to stick to are being followed. There may be deviations here and there, but that's why you want to do the audits, do the checks every at a certain frequency to make sure that the compliance and security is being enforced. So that concludes the analytics part and the action part. And to me, that's governance. Now, it's generic enough in your imagination what kind of tools that you need, what kind of people training that you need to onboard, what kind of skills that you might need. These analytics and actions very much you can draw the basis for your team composition. So I leave it to your actions, your imaginations. How do you put this together? But those actions, those analytics uh, provide a solid foundation for governance. One thing which I did not mention this is as I said, I'm not talking about any tools. I'm not talking about any processes. You could do this manually very much. All of this is doable manually. But the question is, do you really want to do this manually? Some of this may be possible, but not all of this may be possible. For instance, discovery, which requires you to find your inventory if you do not already have in place, right? You could very much go to all the team members, ask them, hey guys, can you give me your documentation that has documented all the APIs you guys have built so far? Or you go to the IT and say, can we deploy this agent in our gateway, which does the discovery automatically and document all our APIs moving forward and so on and so forth. So I'm not saying which route you take, but you need to have something in place to put these actions and the analytics together. So there are various ways you can do this manually and automatically, but let me give you some pros and cons of doing this manually and in an automated way. You can very much do this manually, but it is difficult for you to scale. You can perhaps manage this, all of that process I talked about. If you have, 10 APIs, 20 APIs, maybe 100 APIs, you can document them on an Excel sheet. That Excel sheet is online on a Google Drive. All the developers can see it. You have a small team, everybody can see. Anybody who goes build APIs, they can document it there. And there could be a number of reasons. You may have a Confluence page. There are a number of ways you can do this. But if you're talking about hundreds and thousands, clearly this is unmanageable manually. Okay. So scalability becomes a challenge. Also consistency. So if one person does it in one way, then another person may end up doing another way. So you need to have that consistency across. Otherwise, sooner or later, you will hit some problems in collecting those analytics I talked about. So you need to standardize certain things. You need to have some consistency to achieve those standards. Um, and of course, when you're doing it manually, you're slow. You have problems in deployment, in deploying those processes in place, using those tools and whatnot. Also, your coverage may be limited. Maybe you did this manually for one unit, but another unit couldn't do it because simply they didn't have the resources. So if you go through this list from a coverage point of view, from a risk perspective, from a security and compliance perspective, from very experienced perspective from for your developers, internally, externally, from maintenance, all of this is doable manually. But again, this becomes difficult and in some cases impossible for you to do it manually. So now let me, perfect. So we are, my first break is at 90 minutes. So 45 plus 45, we are about to hit 5:30, which is our halfway, which is our break at 90 minutes. So we are very much on time. Now let me spend 10 or 15 minutes or so on the challenges of distributed API governance. Now you might ask me, where is this distributed governance you talked about? You didn't introduce what is distributed governance. You just said API governance. What does distributed API governance means now? Well, if you are paying attention, the enterprise API ecosystem that I talked about is not only distributed, but this is also decentralized, right? Decentralized in many different ways. You have different business units. Those business units are using different APIs. You may have different developers. Those developers are building different APIs for different customers, and so on and so forth for various business units. So even for usability perspective, if you want to take an account of all the APIs that are used across your products and services, this becomes a challenging issue, right? So once again, this usability aspect of your APIs internally or of your APIs externally becomes a challenge when it scales to hundreds and thousands of developers using those APIs and you building hundreds and tens of those APIs. Now recall, this is again one of the slides from my previous workshops. In this ecosystem that I shared a few slides ago, with this complex enterprise ecosystem picture I showed you, there are different stakeholders. Somebody is responsible for the business aspects of those APIs. I call them business stakeholders. Somebody is responsible for building those APIs or even integrating APIs, third-party APIs. So again, technical stakeholders. Then you have consumers that are consuming your APIs, but also then you have ecosystem and partner stakeholders who are depending on APIs or enabling your APIs to be used in their ecosystem. So we have different stakeholders in this ecosystem. That's what makes it distributed. Okay. So you have product owners from a business perspective. You have marketing team members who need to advertise your APIs as part of the technical features that are available for them to enable the sales team to sell the products and services. And, and last but not the least, the legal and the compliance team as also the business stakeholders, because they're focused on business risk management. From the technical stakeholders' point of view, you have developers who are producing those APIs. You have managers who are responsible for managing the portfolios of those APIs. Then you have architects who are looking inside your entire ecosystem, what supports scalability, security, all those different aspects they need to make sure. Then you have security teams, testers, or then you have product managers who are responsible for the overall product management of their products and services. From a consumer point of view, you have internal developers. Maybe these APIs you build for a different business unit to break the different data silos, or you have external developers who are consuming those APIs either with commercial reasons or for just purely because of integrations reasons. Or then you have third parties, end users who are directly using or depending on your APIs. Then you have partner ecosystem, technology partners, third-party vendors, or governance committees. These are not necessarily your internal teams. Maybe there is a review committee by your partner. Maybe you have hired a due diligence committee to audit you, and you're spending a lot of money to do that. So you have these different committees evaluating you. So in summary, you have a distributed API ecosystem upon which you're trying to achieve API governance. And you have all these different issues you're talking about. Okay. The very first one is the sprawl problem. Your API system is growing. in some cases out of control, with all the internal APIs, external APIs, paid APIs, free APIs, open source APIs, commercial APIs, and so on and so forth. So you have various fragmentation of those APIs in your ecosystem. You have inconsistencies with different standards, right? So somebody has just built a more modern REST API. Somebody is looking at GraphQL. Somebody is looking at other types of API. Now I'm hearing different AI agents that need to consume those APIs. So you're building agents on top of your APIs that can expose those APIs to the AI agentic agents who can consume your APIs. And from a monetization point of view, that's the success you want. If your APIs are being consumed by a larger ecosystem, that's a success. But then you have various security vulnerabilities that you need to manage. And this may be because of the lack of unified policies that you have in place. Somebody looks at some vulnerabilities in 1 week. Somebody looks at some of them just next quarter because simply they don't have resources. Then you have compliance difficulties. Regulatory requirements are becoming more and more complex. As APIs evolve, you have multiple ways that risk can evolve as well from the various perspective I talked about. Then, because you have various structured, unstructured ways of development, integrations, and all, it's leading to various operational inefficiencies. So some you are able to audit immediately, some you are not able to audit because of X number of technical reasons. Um, one prospect that we just encountered recently, this is our second meeting with them. Their challenge is many of their applications they want to audit from API discovery perspective is not built by them. So it's in Azure environment, it's in other cloud environments. They don't even have access to those applications. And some applications are built in-house, but many of those applications are built by third parties. In some cases, those are applications that are off-the-shelf white label solutions provided by big vendors like Google or Microsoft. So because of those reasons, now they are on different scales. They're not able to discover certain things for audit purposes on one ecosystem versus the other. So they have all these inefficiencies in their systems to put a process in place for API governance. Then the knowledge sharing becomes a barrier. One team is at this scale, another team is at a different scale. They understand security, some do not understand security, some understand rate challenges, some do not understand rate challenges, some understand the licensing issues better because they have their business leader, a lawyer, versus they have some engineer who is basically very tech deep, doesn't care about the licensing issues. So you have frustrations with developer consumers, people who are consuming your APIs simply because you have the documentation that is not very robust, or the worst situation is not readable, or even the worst case scenario, they don't have documentation. Because of all these reasons, siloed processes, the management not moving forward, complex maintenance, deprecated, not deprecated APIs, deciding what to deprecate, not to deprecate, what to maintain, these all lead to various challenges. You have this in distributed, decentralized API governance. And some cases, you might end up doing things manually simply because not everything was possible for you to automate. And that's a good way for us to break and take a 10 minutes break where I will talk about the automation and intelligence because all what I described is makes sense. Analytics, actions, putting a plan in place, but also being aware of the challenges. So we are not flying blind in this space. But again, now I will help on this when we come back after the break, what some of the intelligence and automation uh, ways can help us with API governance. So 10 minutes break, Dave.
So
Okay.
before Before
Tim,
we,
did you want to do one of the
oh, yeah,
polls?
should be all of them, I think, but yeah, it's basically to try to get an overall view of how people have class and they're interested.
It's hard to hear you, man.
I don't know what the deal is.
So I
Anyway,
guess
I'll launch it.
maybe this is time to launch the question. Okay, good. So I can see the question now. So if while you're taking breaks, please see if you can answer this question. I guess this will help Tim and Dave more than it helps me. But again, this is very important for me as well to know if this is something that excited you enough so that we can come back and do more workshops like this.
Mhm.
I'm just gonna mute myself and come back in 10 minutes.
Okay, sounds good. I'm gonna use the restroom.
Uh, is there a way for you to enable the audio for them?
What's that? I'm sorry.
Irene has a question.
Oh, sure.
She's on, I've set her to talk. She just needs to unmute.
It just says ask to unmute.
She already did.
No, I'm saying that it's telling me that remove. It
No,
says,
she's got permission. She's muted herself.
oh, Irene, yeah. Well, can I?
Because I already enabled her.
Yeah, Irene, you have been given permission to talk, but it looks like you might be self-muted.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess while we wait for her
Here.
to figure out to unmute, we can continue.
Sure.
Okay, so I'm looking at the poll results. 31% have attended one workshop and 38% have attended 4. So that's good. But only 13 people participated in the poll.
There's 27 participants. So yeah, some people just aren't going to
Okay, so
answer.
if you want to answer that later, that's fine. So let's just continue with the rest of the presentation. I guess the poll has ended.
No, I haven't ended it.
Oh, you did not. Okay.
It's still up if somebody wants, maybe not,
All right. So let's just continue with the rest of the agenda. Before we took the break, we talked about how enterprise APIs are evolving. I gave examples of various organizations. I gave various definitions of what does it mean to be the largest. I also talked about what API governance means in terms of analytics and actions, and what would be the challenge if you want to use analytics and actions to put a API governance process in place. Now let me turn the attention towards what are some of the best practices that we can embed inside this process. Okay, so let me go through some of those details. The best practice number one is to make sure your APIs are secure. I guess I'm hearing my echo back. Okay, now this is okay. So best practice number one, secure your APIs. You want to make sure that all the APIs that you have built are secure by design. You have looked at various mechanisms to secure them, but one of the frameworks that you can put in place to secure your APIs is OWASP Top 10. And in my security focused workshop number 2, I talked about this in detail, but let me refresh your thoughts again. The authentication and authorization aspects within the API security recommendation here are the two most important parts. Basically, making sure that all the APIs you're putting in place are have some authentication built into them. And also, once they're authenticated, then you are giving proper authorization, what resources can be accessed using those APIs and by who. So authorization as well. So these are some of the details you can go back and read and understand from my previous workshops. You can also go to OWASP's website directly, where you can talk about what could break your API security framework. Is it that your authorization layer is broken? So broken authorization, or BOLA, that we know in short, is a problem when your API calls can be made by manipulating either the parameters in the path of the API URL or URI, and also by manipulating the IDs that are supposed to be used to make calls to those APIs. So the authorization could be broken in many, many different ways. So these are some of the examples I shared. You could also have authentication broken, which is in the top 10 recommendations. And here, basically, you are giving access to your APIs without having a proper authentication framework in place. So this is no good. Even you may have a reason to believe you don't need authentication for this API because this is simply giving my restaurant details. But again, that could be something that a bad actor could exploit for launching um, a service of denial attack or a similar problem. So you want to make sure that you do not have broken authentication problem with your APIs. I'm going to quickly skip through the rest of them because I've already covered them in very detail in my workshop number 2, focused on API security. But the point I want to make is authentication and authorization are two important parts that are, uh, you know, within the top 10, there are top 2 problems that OWASP has identified that we should pay attention to. The second best practice you want to put in place for your API governance program is monitor your APIs. The first was secure your APIs. The second one is monitor your APIs. So what does monitoring mean? Monitoring is essentially needed to make sure that your APIs are not being abused. Okay. And there are various reasons why your APIs could be abused. You may have malicious actors trying to exploit the data or the underlying resources, or in worst case situations, they are amalgamating the data from various API calls and basically eroding your intellectual property in a specific ways. So by monitoring your APIs, you will be able to a put a certain control on your API usage to make sure that your APIs will not be abused. But then the question is, how do you know your APIs are being abused? So what kind of monitoring you need in place? So that's typically we track by seeing the signs or the indicators of compromise. If you see these IOCs or indicator of compromise, then you know that you first of all your API monitoring is working. Second is you need to put some action in place to make sure that your APIs will not be abused moving forward. So what are some of those indicators of compromise that you can put in place? The very first is if you see unusual or suspicious API calls. Okay, now, you have various ways to monitor this. You could do this manually by inspecting this on a random sampling basis, but this is very hard to do it manually. So you need certain tools to detect this, whether your APIs are under suspicious calls. So the suspicion could arise from the fact that you have a specific user who is based in the US, but then the API calls are coming from, let's say, the UK. So you have a reason to believe that the API keys might be stolen. So either you have uh, uh, suddenly increased in the API call limits that this person or this organization was supposed to make, or you have certain calls that are being made from spatially or contextually from a different places. The second indicator of compromise is when you see multiple failed authentication and authorization calls. So that indicates that somebody is trying to access your APIs, although they are not getting access to the APIs. And kudos to you because you have put a authorization and authentication framework in place before somebody gets access to your APIs. But you can still monitor who is making calls to those APIs and which ones have failed attempts. Okay, so that will enable that somebody is actually trying to do something fishy with your APIs. So that's your second indication of compromise. The third indicator that you could monitor is the anomalous user behavior. For example, uh, I'm just going to say, Dave, we know that you make 100 API calls for a particular product and services using a particular API from a particular company. Now, suddenly that company notices there are 100,000 calls made by Dave. Now, suddenly this is anomalous behavior. Why this is happening, that could be a number of reasons. There could be legitimate reasons, but there could also be the cases in which maybe Dave's API key is stolen. So somebody just helped themselves, got the API key, used the API in the product services, internally, externally, whatever the situation is. By monitoring the behavior, you are at least able to detect that not normal activity. So the difference here is it is authenticated, it is legitimate user, but the behavior is not consistent, the behavior is not normal. So that is another indicator of API abuse. Similar case in which the traffic is unusual. For example, we know that this company has a product positioning deployed in this particular region. Now, suddenly we see the traffic coming from another IP or another host region and whatnot. So that could raise another concern that why these traffic patterns have changed. What could be the reason? Did they launch a new product or service in which they are deploying this applications on a different server or in a different location or for a different customers that requires to change the underlying traffic conditions and whatnot. So you could have a number of reasons to think about. But if you don't monitor it, you don't know in this unusual traffic pattern. If somebody is making calls to your deprecated or outdated APIs, that's another indicator. Now, this could very much be a legitimate user who's still using your old APIs into one of their legacy applications. So there is no reason for you to believe that this is always suspicious activity. But at least if you are not expecting, let's say there is no pattern of using your APIs in the last year or so. All the deprecated APIs you saw, the traffic died down. There is a zero call. Now suddenly you see some traffic to your older API calls. That's a reason to believe that somebody is perhaps trying to exploit the deprecated or outdated versions of APIs. Rate limiting violations. If somebody has a rate limit of 100,000 calls, you see suddenly a 10% increase or 20% failed attempts. But again, kudos to you or credits to you that you were by having the rate limits in place, you were able to block their accesses. That's great sign. But if somebody is repeatedly going over rate limits, that's another reason for you to investigate. Maybe this is a marketing touch point with the customer. Hey, we see that your rate limits have gone up. Do you need a larger subscription? Do you need, maybe this is an opportunity for you to upsell. But again, this is also a indicator for you to believe that this could be a compromise or a malicious attack. If you have certain APIs being injected certain type of inputs, then you have a reason to believe that somebody could be launching a cross-site scripting um, attack, or maybe somebody's trying to inject malicious code through your APIs. By design, APIs are built to accept inputs and give you output back in terms of JSON response, in terms of image, or in terms of audio processing, or whatnot, whatever the API is designed to do. But again, if the inputs are being exploited and the inputs are looking suspicious, that's your other indicator of compromise. The misuse of API token, but how do you detect that this is being misused? Well, there are various ways you can triangulate where you can see this region, this user do not match. This could be a indicator of misuse of token. Changes to API configurations, I should say unauthorized changes to your API configurations. If this is something was not authorized and suddenly you see the rate limits changed by the DevOps team or some product teams that were not authorized to make changes, that you have a reason to believe why these changes are made. If you have a evidence of a escalated authorized usage that has escalated to the level where it's a command and control attack, where basically somebody has access to an API that is essentially an admin level API, which gives access to other resources or perhaps more data through which a larger or a persistent attack can be launched. So you want to see indicators of those. So in summary, you need various monitoring mechanisms to monitor these analytics to make sure that your API governance is in good shape and you can take preventive, proactive, or descriptive actions moving forward to make sure that your API posturing, security posturing, compliance posturing is retained. Now let's look into some of the regulatory and organizational requirements. So far, what I've talked about as a best practice is when you have authentication in place, you have a monitoring in place, you also need to pay attention to the fact that you need to be compliant. So let's look into the best practice number 3, which is regulating your APIs. Now, this regulation of APIs has three various perspectives. One from API producer perspective, another from API consumer perspective, and the third one from API consumer and producer perspective. So just to be clear, producer means you have built APIs for others to consume. API consumer means you are consuming APIs built by others. And in the third category, you are both. You're consuming APIs, you're building APIs, and so and so and so forth. So what are these different perspectives? How do they play a different role in making sure that you are compliant or you are meeting or regulating your APIs to meet your compliance objectives? So how do you regulate? Now, this is a part that I covered. Just give me 1 second. Anybody has a quick tip on how to stop hiccups? I don't know. I certainly got hiccups.
Hang on, I'll ask Chat GPT. Yeah.
Our favorite tool now. By the way, I have something that I will be demonstrating using ChatGPT in one of the sections. But anyways, I think I'm good. My hiccup has stopped for some reason. Maybe it got scared with ChatGPT word.
The threat of his suggestions.
All right. So the question I was posing to the audience was, what are these different three perspectives that I'm talking about from a producer, consumer, or producer and consumer perspective? I did touch upon this topic in greater detail in workshop number 3. Now, fortunately or unfortunately, not every country and organization has a specific laws or policies. I should not say policies. Maybe there are organization policies that are specifically designed for APIs, but they are not specifically designed for APIs. There are laws that are specifically designed for protecting privacy, protecting uh, children's right, workers' right. Essentially, they are rooted in the usage of data. And since APIs are nothing but a way to transact data, enable the data integrations with various products and services, and do much more than that. Even if it is ChatGPT API, I see them as a data. In this case, the data is a bit more intelligent because it's more like a decision rather than data, raw data, like what an API, whether API would give us. But again, at the end of the day, it's a data. So there are various frameworks in place. You can read about these in my workshop number 3, where I talked about there are various laws and regulations already in place by various countries. This is a list of various privacy specific laws that are in place. So if certain laws tell you that you cannot violate the privacy of citizens by exchanging this data in this particular way, so think about your APIs will come under that particular framework. Because if your API is transacting customer information with their private information, you have to make sure that you are compliant with the underlying services. So these could be at national levels, it could be at the provincial level, in the states, it could be at the state level, and so on and so forth. Or in some cases, depending on where you conduct business, you may have some additional, other requirements for the cities as well. From the enterprise perspective, you may have various privacy statements, policies, API, terms of services, global privacy statements, because this company is, for example, platform like Facebook. So they not only have developer platform policies, but they also have global privacy policies because it depends on where do you consume their APIs. Similarly, if you're using Google Maps API, then you have a specific terms of services. But if you use Google translation APIs, then you have specific terms and conditions that are specific to that particular API. So depending on what the situation is, what is the underlying business functionalities, you may have various obligations with respect to using those APIs from an enterprise perspective. And you might be doing the same thing. You may have this ecosystem if you are building those APIs that you and your customers and partners are using. So this is mainly more interesting if you are consuming somebody's API. Then all of this becomes a very interesting but a challenging a problem for the teams to manage because of some of the issues are related to the scalability that I discussed previously. But I'll go into a little bit more detail later. So from a policy and regulations perspective, to be compliant, don't just look at APIs from a product or engineering asset that you have put in place to be used, but also look at from a data sovereignty perspective. All the APIs, what APIs they're hosting, where they are hosted, what data they are transacting, this has impact on your export control policies as well as data governance policies that you have already put in place. So let's look into the second part of this workshop. And the second uh, aspect of that, which is how can we leverage upon automation and intelligence in our API management that would help us with API governance, dealing with scalability, and also some of the difficult problems that we are trying to solve here. A discovery problem, for example, you can do manually, but if you have too much inventory, you don't know where those assets are distributed, which applications are deployed where, then you have a problem of actually discovering as well. But also, you have a problems like managing the terms of services of those APIs if you're consuming from a very large ecosystem. So that's where the intelligence and automation will help us scale these solutions moving forward. Let's look into the first part, how we can automate API lifecycle management. To explain this concept, I'm going to walk you through this workflow. This workflow has four key elements: discovery, identification, tracking, alert, and recommendation. So let me explain this one by one. Why this is important, you can look at the top layer, which talks about how your APIs are evolving all the time, how your developers are adding new APIs, deprecating old ones, integrating new third-party APIs, how the licensing team needs to worry about what APIs we are consuming, or they also need to work with the business teams, what kind of terms and conditions we should pose for our consumers. You have DevOps teams, security teams. You need to have collaboration in place that I talked about, that you need to nurture as a governing body to make sure that your APIs are secure and you are able to drive success for your entire organization. So these five pieces are discovery, identification, tracking, alerting, and recommendation. So let's look into this one by one. The very first piece for you to automate your API lifecycle management or the process that you want to put in place is the discovery. Discovery of APIs. Uh, and discovery of APIs does not restrict you to just finding APIs. You need to know the vendors. You need to know what this API does. Perhaps it'll be nice for you to know what's the type of this API, what's the category of this API, what exactly this API does. You may or may not be able to achieve this in every situation, depending on the level of discovery you are putting in place. If it is through interviews or talking to developers to find out those APIs, or is it that you're deploying an agent in your application or CI/CD pipeline or with your network. The second one is once you discover those APIs, you need to know the underlying security and technical problems, right? remember my business risk, remember my remember my discussion about operational risk. So you need to discover all those. Finding this API is one thing, finding the vendor is one thing, but what are the risks that are associated with those APIs? You need to find those. And you need to track these on constant basis. It is not just one-time exercise, right? So you need to track those changes, look into those issues in a manual way or in an automated way, but you have to do this constantly. You need to inform different stakeholders. Remember, you have product managers, you have developers, you have security teams, you have partner ecosystem, you have lawyers. So you have to alert different stakeholders on various issues that you discover. Last but not the least, recommend. Okay, so you need to do those recommendations to your different product teams or even internal teams or security teams. But the point is, you have gone through this process, you have learned certain things, you must make some recommendations to make sure that your third-party integrations, your internal APIs, your publicly facing APIs are all under a a governance plan, which is having their own specific policies that you can put in place. So, in summary, you need these 5 basic ingredients to manage the life cycle of your APIs. Now, let's look into in this process, while we are building this process in place, how we
Hey,
can leverage upon.
sorry. Baljeet,
Mhm.
sorry, I just Robert had shared a comment in the chat that I wanted to relate to. Yeah. He said, I ran across 35 countries with data protection regulations when I was working on my privacy book. There are a lot of them. Tried pacing them, but they were too big. It's a big deal.
Okay. Um, so that's a comment, or is that a question?
No, I think it was more of a comment and just a contribution to what he found when he was doing his research. That's how
Right,
I interpreted it.
right. And this is very useful. Thanks for sharing the feedback. I'm sure the details might be you know a separate topic itself. How the discovery worked. How did you find out all those provisioning countries wherever those data assets were stored or being stored? That's a challenging problem in itself. But I'm assuming somehow when you arrived to that stage, you understood, oh man, what problem we are facing now.
Right.
And this is very much similar to that situation I tried to explain on this picture there. So each dot there is like your API host server. This could be your internal picture, this could be your external picture, or it could be a combination of both. But it's very similar to the comment that is made there, where I talked about what could be the challenge from a data sovereignty perspective. But now let me explain. So there is a help. There is help for finding APIs if you don't know. There's help to automate the security to make sure that after we discover APIs, to make sure that they have robust security posture in place. We can manage the legal aspects. We can see what vendors are there, what are the categorization of those APIs, and what we need to do to make sure that we can continue to consume their APIs without violating the terms and services. So we can solve all those problems that I talked about. But we need help. We need help from AI or different flavors of data science that can help us with embedding machine learning or NLP, natural language processing tools in place, or building predictive models that will allow us to predict the behavior, to prevent certain types of attacks and things like that. So let me spend some time on explaining what are some of the ways AI and other modern data science driven technologies can help us solve those issues to put a robust API governance program. And those 6 items are listed here. Let me go through them one by one. The very first on my list always is API discovery. That's where you start, because to put a governance in place, remember, you need analytics, you need actions. To me, analytics is also about finding your APIs. That's basic analytic you need. Without that, you cannot move forward. So here, you need to either through manual ways or through uh, automated ways, you need to discover. Now, AI could be very useful, or at least if not, AI could be overboard solution for this, but you need some sort of intelligence to interface with your networks, to interface with your applications, or a combination of both, where intelligently we can discover your APIs in your ecosystem. So we can constantly monitor your different environments, application environment, your your documentation environments, your platforms where you are collaborating, coordinating, communicating, plus the machines as well, the servers, the gateways, where we can deploy agents to do the discovery, consolidate all those analytics, push them onto a dashboard where you can see, okay, what we found. So discovery, top problem, in my opinion, where AI can be useful. The second item where the AI could be useful is the dynamic traffic pattern analysis. And this is in the context of applying the machine learning to understand the underlying patterns in the API usage. Now, you must be wondering, why do we need to understand the usage? Well, remember the problem of abused, your API is being abused. You could be a legitimate user, but then you may have a stolen credential problem in which your APIs are suddenly being used or abused in a specific geography or by specific individuals. So machine learning can help us build certain models that can understand your underlying API usage patterns. Okay, we can build various models which can look at from a performance point of view, from a usage point of view, to tune up your policies, to give you where the bottlenecks might be in certain geographies, in certain types of users, and whatnot. So it's not just one solution. By leveraging upon these models that are built upon your label data, perhaps if you already have enough data, API usage data, you can build certain models by saying this customer has this kind of usage pattern, this customer has a different kind of usage pattern, and if you put together, then you essentially have a model. Now, if your usage pattern goes beyond that model as an outlier, you can flag this. So machine learning solution can be very useful in understanding this pattern and building this model to detect anomalous behavior. The second is context-aware rate limit. Now, have you ever experienced when you're waiting at a traffic light, you see that there is no traffic coming from right and left, and you wished that traffic was somehow had this images or the cameras AI driven, which can analyze the traffic in real time and adjust how much stop and red light and green light they have to provide. In a similar way, this is very much the same problem, um, where you are not hard limiting your users from using your APIs. Okay, they are contextually the gateways or the policies or the procedures or the tools that are in place They are aware of the context in which APIs are being used, right? So AI can intelligently adopt to those rate limits. It can see, oh, you are in San Diego right now, but I know you are now making calls from New York, maybe because you just moved your location. By the way, this information is already recorded in the model or in your in your pattern where now suddenly your rate limit for calls in San Diego were 100,000. You can scale it to 1 million simply because now you are in a part of a larger ecosystem, being in New York. So that is just an example. I made it up, but I think you get the point. It need not be just that context. The context could be very rich. The context could be from a usage perspective. Context could be from geography perspective. Context could be from even the premium pricing perspective as well. So you could, if you have that intelligence, if you have that context aware intelligence, you could block calls more effectively. You can you can give more privileges to the legitimate users who have suddenly increased their demands, but in a legitimate way. And you can have a not a hard switch turning on and off on API usage. Especially this context aware rate limiting could be very useful for monetization purposes. Without letting your APIs being abused, you are contextually aware that yes, this limit needed to go up, but because you increase the limit, you are also making more money because each API call gives you $1 or so or so forth. So by having this flexible contextual aware rate limits, you could actually not just be doing favor to your security program or security posting, but also making your CFO happy as well because you have a good plan in place. The fourth item where AI could be useful or data science-driven technology could be useful is predictive analytics for capacity planning. And this is in the context of scaling your infrastructure. Now you have lots of data from various DevOps operations, from users, from APIs, how they were used. So you can apply various machine learning practices by which you can predict how much API usage that I'm building right now for this particular context, for this particular market that I need, so that you can provision the resources accordingly. Just like you have a monetization strategy that every API call is a dollar value for you. But similarly, each API call is also cost to you because CPU cost, the memory cost, the processing cost, and other types of costs. So if you are able to predict this in a better way, you can provision infrastructure properly. And that's how you will be able to scale your APIs properly. Some APIs may need that stronger infrastructure support, but some APIs may need it. So you can make decisions in a more intelligent way. You could also leverage some of the AI capabilities if you're able to leverage the integration of user feedback into your ecosystem by integrating real-time data, logging the telemetry data that you have about your API usage and things like that. Even looking at the error rate limits and other analytics that you could collect, you might be able to support your community better. In some cases, you might need to scale up the support. In some cases, you want to scale down or narrow down onto the specific set of customers where you need to focus more because these are premium customers and whatnot. So here, having the ability for you to continuously utilize the feedback user and feed those into some AI models would be useful uh, from the API management perspective. Last but not the least, the legal risk management. Once again, this topic I discussed in greater detail in my last workshop, which was focused on legal API legal risk management. Here, the idea is if you have so many third-party API integrations in your ecosystem, you have to worry about all the legal obligations that you have from those vendors, which are essentially rooted in the usage of APIs, which are governed by the terms of services or privacy statements that those vendors have enforced upon you. If the obligation is onto you, how do you ensure that you are compliant? Um, but again, you could you could very much depend on some NLP solutions that I'll talk about in greater detail now, where AI could help us in a better way. So these are the 6 key topics I already discussed. The sixth one I'm going to discuss in more detail now. But these are the 6 intelligent steps or intelligent technologies that can help you with API governance in a big way, if you are able to leverage upon some of the advanced data science techniques like AI. Now as I said, I want to talk about this policies and legal risk management in more detail, where AI can help us in a greater way, simply because this is a difficult problem where AI can actually truly help us um, solve this problem. And that problem is summarized in 3 key points here: finding API agreements, tracking API agreements changes, and quantifying the business risk based on those changing agreements. So one of the things I want to do practically right now is to highlight what challenges we face in each of these dimensions. Let me take a quick pause and ask you or the audience, what is your process look like when you're using or consuming a third-party API? Or there is no process in place right now, to the best of your knowledge? So I'll give a few minutes to everybody so that either you can type in the question Q&A or chat window your answer, but I'm not sure if Dave, you can unmute them.
Yeah, if anybody wants to be unmuted, just raise your hand and Tim and I can enable audio or go ahead and drop any thoughts or comments that you have in the chat as well. I haven't heard anything back yet.
Okay, I guess we can just continue.
Yeah, let's.
Yeah, recall my previous few slides where I mentioned what's the framework that we need to govern these APIs. I talked about this. You have privacy statements, you have API terms specifically dedicated to specific APIs provided by vendor. So when I speak as a consumer, the obligation is on to me to read it, to make sure that the API usage is compliant, and so on and so forth. So the obligation is on to me. It's not on to the provider who's providing the API. So the very first question that comes to your mind is, what are those terms of services? What are those agreements? Where do I find them? Sometimes they are listed on the developer portal. Sometimes they are somehow hidden within the online portals. But in many cases, they are also available just on the home pages of these vendors. And that uh, solves part of the problem because you can manually go see. But again, if you want to review or look into hundreds of thousands of APIs, then it's not easy for you to go do this manually. So finding API agreements become problematic. Another challenge, which is very unique to APIs, is tracking the agreement changes in those agreements. It's unlike license problem. So whenever you use a library or third-party library, you are often given a you're often given a terms of services to use, and you have basically bunch of agreements that you need to read and make sure that you are compliant with those. But then you conduct this due diligence with your legal team to make sure that you can you are compliant. But one thing they cannot help you with is if these terms of services change. So I was explaining, just like the software license, when you have a particular license like Apache or MIT, then you're pretty much aware that what kind of terms and obligations you have that you need to be compliant with. But with API terms of services, you are maybe compliant today when you started using those APIs, but 6 months, 3 months down the road, they change. The terms of services change. And I was just experimenting with, can AI bots can help me find those agreements, find those changes in those agreements. Let's say if I consume today, if I consume 6 months from now, are those terms of services changed? Do I need to go back and do my due diligence again? If they do change, what are those changes? Am I still compliant? If I was using 6 months ago, but I still need to use it for the next year or two. So am I still compliant? So you have all these issues. But the real problem is that it's not only that you have to see what are the agreements, where to find those agreements. If I use today, I did my due diligence, I'm compliant today, but 6 months of down the road, what changes may have occurred, and how do I quantify my business risk? And when we think about all those situations, it is practically impossible for us to solve that problem, given that we may have hundreds and thousands of APIs. If each of those APIs have at least two agreements, privacy statement, terms of services, then you are talking about at least 2 times or 3 times of those agreements that you need to monitor, find, and be compliant with moving forward. That is a topic I discussed in greater detail in workshop number 3. You're welcome to go watch the video. I've also talked about various business models, licensing models that companies are adopting for those APIs. We have gone through that in greater detail, but I just refresh some of these thoughts here. And I guess this is perfect timing. This is 6:30 now. This is actually we are a little bit over time in taking a break, but I think it's still good. We can take a 10 minutes break, Dave, right now, and then come
Sure.
back at 6:40 and resume the workshop. But when you come back, we will do some practicals and I will show you how AI can actually solve some of these problems in a more intelligent way.
Awesome.
Okay, so before we took the break, we were talking about the the usage of AI for a specific problem, which was legal agreement management, that we wanted to see how it can help us automate and perhaps make the API governance process a bit more intelligent, because we understand uh, there will often be the use case of using third-party APIs in your ecosystem. So you need to pay attention to what are the underlying terms and services for those third-party APIs. So that's the use case. Um, to to demonstrate the use case, I'm going to do this practically on the TeejLab platform, plus use ChatGPT. I'll start with ChatGPT and show you various tips and techniques. Some of them may not surprise you that they're good enough, but I will also show you some alternates and where the existing chat GPT based solutions may still not be enough. So we may need specialized solutions to solve those problems. The very first thing that I want to highlight is, let's say you want to answer the first question about Google API. So you are using a bunch of Google APIs and you don't know where the terms of services are. It is possible for your developer team, if you go to Google's, let's just go there. So if I go to Google Developer Portal, so this would take me to their portal where I might see the terms of services listed here. Somewhere we have to find. So these are terms. I'm not sure if these are specific to the API terms or this is just the website terms. But there we go. So here, Google API console. If I go to console, what do I find there? Remind me later. Okay. No luck here, so I go back. Let's go see terms. Site terms, Google API terms. So we are able to find this guy, Google API terms. As you can see that it's not easy for someone to find those terms. So the use cases that I found in my personal experience interacting with some organization is they would have internal process in place. If a developer wants to use some vendor's API, they would basically go ask their team, and team has a delegated working with a lawyer who basically guides them. Okay, these are the things you guys can do. And some cases they would try to understand what's the use case under which you will be using this API. So they provide their due diligence based on that, and there you go. But there are a lot of challenges, as you can see that within one single vendor, it took me some time to find out where actually the API terms of services are. So it's not easy problem. But that's where I think we could take some help from ChatGPT. So let's see if I can. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. Okay, there you go. So I have a ChatGPT session opened up. So if you ask ChatGPT, list all the API specific terms from Google. So that's my first problem. Remember, if I go back to this problem, that's the first problem it can solve. I believe it can. So I ask this prompt, wait for a few seconds. It does give me a reasonably good answer. So Google API terms, YouTube, although I might not be using, but it is still listing YouTube because that's a Google product. YouTube developer agreement, Google. So, but still my problem doesn't end there. I need to figure out what is applicable to me, because I might be using a specific API term depending on what API I'm using. So if I go to Google Maps, can you find Google Maps? So it might be able to find the ones that are applicable to Google Maps. So I don't need to go search all these terms of services. So it does give me the link, and that's reasonable, right? So that's what I would expect. And I'm sure nobody's surprised with this result. So this is helpful. This is great. Now, speaking of the third problem, that track these changes and quantify API business risks are a little bit tricky. Let's see if AI tool can solve this problem. So the first prompt I'm going to ask is, let's see this one. Can you summarize the terms? Okay, so if I ask this prompt, oh, there is some error. So let me redo this again. I'm using free version, so don't be surprised if I don't have very accurate results. But I think I should be able to prove my point, what I'm trying to say. So here, not only I'm able to find the agreement, but also I'm saying, okay, tell me what are my obligations? What are some of the things that are the main sections? So it does a good job. It gives me a good understanding. Now, lawyers may not necessarily accept, like this. They may not agree to this because they will say, oh, no, 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 no. If you go read this particular statement, that means something different. But this is still, to a developer and end user, this is still reasonable. If they have some doubt or question that is in not inconsistent with the usage of their specific API use case, then of course they can go seek more guidance from the legal team and whatnot. But again, that solves my second problem as well, where I can see, okay, I'm not a lawyer. I cannot read the whole document. I don't have time. Tell me what are some of the bullet points that this agreement is telling me. Done. Now, this is the third problem I'm going to solve. And this is based on the fact that if you go to this particular agreement that I just analyzed, then you will realize that this terms of service was last changed in 2021, right? And if I, let's say, approve this today, uh, 6 months from now or 1 year from now, it could change again. Then I don't know what to do. I need to go back and reread this again or do analysis, take help from ChatGPT again. But let's see if it can find, if it can solve that problem for me. Can you give me a Now let's see what it does. So if I do this, I'm expecting some variation. So it is saying that it seems like it has access from April 2020 to 2024 and beyond. So it is saying between 2020 and 2024, there is change in the structure of the document. There is change in the pre-GA to GA offering. I don't know what GA means here. Caching and usage permissions. So they're saying between 2020 and 2024, there are some caching changes requirement, so on and so forth. So that's precisely what a lawyer would do if moving forward these terms have changed. They would go back and do the due diligence again. But I don't want to do this manually, right? So I need to document this. I need to find out. I want to go to a specific date and all that. So some intelligence is there, but it still does not provide me automation. I can do this very manually, but again, I need to automate this. I need to include this in a way so that I can incorporate these changes into my governance process. Because let's say if today I'm approving Google Maps API, then 6 months down the road, something changed. I want that alert to come to me and I want to see what changes are there and go back and do the due diligence and all. So you can see that clearly some of the AI tools can actually help us address this problem moving forward. But then there are other problems. What about the workflow? What about I want to maintain the change? So you still need the workflow engine. You still need to document these changes. You still need to keep the approvals in place and so on and so forth based on whatever you are approving. So from a consumer perspective, from a producer perspective, you have all those changes. So let me show you how we embed the intelligence on top of the automation that we need as part of the this particular use case of managing legal risk from API agreements. So for that, I'm going to switch to my screen again. So I hope that everybody has access to this system. I think Tim sent the invite. If somebody still does not have access to the system, let us know through the chat window, and we can help you resend the invitations again. But I'll give a pause for everybody. If you want to try with me, you can do that right now. You can log in. We will do some use cases. For example, I'm going to try with OpenAI, try to analyze this in a similar fashion what we did through ChatGPT, but in a in a way in which we can document our approvals, record our changes, compare between the agreements in a more structured way for the approval process purposes. But again, using the intelligence, using the automation that I showed in a basic primitive way, using the chat GPT. So I'll give a few seconds of pause here to see everybody, whoever needs to log in to try these examples along with me. And if in case if you don't have account, just put your name in the chat window and we'll see if you have already been sent invitation. If not, we'll send the invitation right now.
Yeah, if anybody does need access, just like Baljeet said, drop your email and name in the chat, and Tim is inside the platform and able to add you.
Okay, excellent.
There's one
So
for you, Tim. Please.
The system says M. Henry's already got one.
Okay, I can also look.
And I'll try Myers.
What's the username, Tim, or the email ID?
M. Henry at cyvient.com. And Robert, yours has been sent.
Sorry, I didn't catch the first email you said.
M. Henry, Henry, at
Okay, yeah, got it,
cyvient.com. Yeah, there he is.
got it. Right. So I can resend the invitation again. The invitation was sent. So did you send the invitation reminder again?
Let's see, it was sent on 7/11, which is today. There must have been one before.
Okay, so let me refresh
Because
this.
today's
I
the
can send a
14th,
reminder
right?
again.
So,
There was no reminder
and
since.
Yeah, that would be part of the batch you did on Friday.
yeah. And so,
I
Maxine,
sent
you should know
the
that it
reminder
might have
again.
gone to your junk mail.
I sent the reminder again to mhenrycivient.com.
Let's see, can we search? Okay, she's got it, she says.
Okay, that's great.
Oh,
Okay. Yep, let's see. So who got, okay.
So mhenry email ID, you should have received a invitation.
Sandra Salazar.
Yeah, so looks like mhenry, no, M. Reyes was able to sign. R. Mayers was able to sign.
Yeah.
But I don't see M. Henry has still signed or not.
yeah, Robert shot a note saying that he is in now. And it's possible Maxine received it but hasn't logged in yet.
Okay.
Yeah, it says she got a reminder 1 minute ago.
Oh, so M. Henry also signed in. So
Oh,
looks
good.
like
Okay.
looks like these two
Yep, she
Okay.
got
individuals
it.
were able
Okay.
to sign it. Yeah, they
Sweet.
got it. Awesome. Okay, so let's continue. So now we are at this use case I wanted to show, which was about open API legal agreement assessment. And so I'm going to do two things. First of all, I already have indexed the terms of use of ChatGPT or OpenAI, as a matter of fact, and I can see what's this document. I can also do an assessment here. And here, my goal is to find out if, okay, so ChatGPT is not letting me analyze this agreement.
Huh.
They are not, they are, okay, so what if I ask them to analyze their own agreement? Let's see. Okay, so okay, so it does give me some assessment on their own agreement. Input remains yours, OpenAI. So all the input remains ours. That's one of the identifiers. But they don't allow a dish extra outside tool to analyze. So what can I do here? Let's see if I can play a trick. I will try one more time. Now they are blocking the assessment. So let's see what else I can do here. Okay, so I will add an archive. Two thousand 22 01 01. So I'm asking them to process a previous version of their agreement. And let's see if I can assess that. And this is, I'm not directly accessing from OpenAI, but I'm accessing from web archives where it's keeping track of some websites. So here, let me do the analysis here. Okay, good. So I was able to assess this particular agreement and find some way to analyze and digest the analysis here. For example, looking into permissions, obligations, and prohibitions. So from a governance point, this helps me with making more informed decision before starting to depend on this particular API. I could do even additional things like, for example, I like this, I don't see any concerns, I can give approval on this. This is approved for uh, product launch in EU. Approval until 31st December 2024. Okay, so basically by combining those intelligence and automation, uh, I can make my governance step a little bit more easier. So just having the ability to intelligently process is not sufficient. Just having the ability to automate is not enough. We need both, as I mentioned there. I think Terence has a question. Terence Maniere.
Oh, who? Okay, here, let me okay, Terrence, you have been given permission to, okay, you should be good now, man.
Yeah.
What was the question that you had?
I have no idea. Just the hand is raised.
Yeah, he did unmute himself.
No, he's muted again. He's off and unmuting.
Yeah,
Yeah, just
Terrence Achonia is
uh,
muted now on your
yeah,
end.
you can unmute yourself and ask the question now. You are
Yeah, we would just need you to unmute yourself on your computer within Zoom there. Or you can drop it in the chat. But all I can do is ask you to unmute.
and now it is unmute. So go ahead.
You are unmuted now.
I don't know.
Okay, well, we can kind of forge ahead and then come back. Terrence, feel free to drop it in the chat, or if you get to a point where you can speak, let us know.
Okay, so while we see if there are any other questions, I'm going to run another use case where I want to compare two different copies, one from 2024, perhaps latest, and the one from 2022, and see if uh, things have changed and what changes are those and what adjustments I need to make moving forward. And this is a topic I discussed in greater detail, how companies are leveraging upon these legal frameworks, not only to protect their IP and their products and services, but also as a double-edged sword to make sure that their competition remains under check. So let me run that part where I add another agreement from a recent version. So this time I'll say 2025. Month is the day, or maybe 07 this month, 01. Okay, so I have two dates that I can compare, 2024, 2022, 2022 and 2025. So update. And I'm gonna go to another dashboard where I'm gonna go to another dashboard to do that comparison. And if you want to do that comparison, you go to my actions and compare my API agreements. So here I want to do OpenAI. What was my vendor name? ChatGPT. So terms of use, I'll just edit them, call them OpenAI because there are so many other terms of, so call them OpenAI. Yeah. AI refresh this. Open. It's not showing up. Did I not save this? Let us see. For some reason it is not showing up here. Let me refresh this. What if I search that GPT? Open API. Oh, I see. I know why. Because this is not my API. I did not add it. It's somebody else's. So it only shows me if I added it.
Hmm.
So this is added by Emmanuel. So it is only showing me the ones. Okay, just give me 1 second. I should be able to. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute and make some changes here. Okay, so this is sheet. Okay, good. So that was indeed the case. So my apologies for the delay. So now these were the two agreements that I want to compare, one from 2022 and the one from 2025. One from 2025. So you can see that a little trick like this could help me understand what has been added or removed from this agreement. So the point I'm trying to make is just the basic steps of finding what those agreements are, finding what the changes are, may not be sufficient for us to fully automate our API governance, the legal management aspect. So there are various aspects that we talked about, but this is the use case I wanted to demonstrate. Now, what I want to do, hopefully you get to try this. So add an agreement, analyze that agreement, see what do you find out, what do you learn from it, and try more cases like this and see what you learn, better understanding what kind of terms of services these vendors are building around their API usage and similar scenarios. Now, as I promised in the beginning, I want to spend some time opening up the forum now for people to ask questions or type in their questions with respect to their key pain points as an API consumer or as an API producer. So let me first do the API consumer part. If you have any specific questions, comments that are related to you as an API producer. Let's say you build an API, you're wondering about the security program, you're wondering about different controls that you're looking to place as a governance in place. This is the time we ask those questions. If you do not want to ask those questions, you're welcome to type in the chat window and I'll try to answer. Then the next phase, I want to ask the questions if you are a consumer of APIs. Specifically, if you're consuming any third-party APIs, what kind of concerns, what kind of practices that you're putting in place, or you're wondering what you should put in place as an API consumer. So those two questions I want, if anybody would like to participate.
We don't have anything new in the chat yet. We are current there.
Okay, let's give them a minute or two. And also, any topics that we would like to discuss based on what I've summarized. So I have a bunch of summary slides, but before I go to the summary slides and give them some home exercises, I just want to give a pause to see if anybody has, as a producer or consumer, any specific questions. We got 15, 20 minutes, so we are good on time. Any thoughts you would like to add, Tim or Dave, while we are waiting for people to pose any questions?
No, although I'll tell you what, I really like the organization of the slides on this one. I mean, it was really good. But I'm surprised we don't get any questions.
Thank you for the feedback.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dave, were you going to say something?
No, I was just gonna say, so like I was just kind of thinking about it while you were going through the legal side of the example. And that's about as, am I understanding correctly that with what you were doing, that's about as automated as we can get that at this time, right?
Yeah, we could, I mean, through ChatGPT or in the TeejLab platform.
Um, Either really, just because what you're covering is something new to me, and looking at it through that legal lens. So kind of in both, meaning just that is a good representation of where things are at these days, maturity wise. I'll put it that way.
I see. I think I understand your question now. So you're saying that as far as the legal risk management part is concerned, based on the API agreements, is your question, this is how far the automation and AI intelligence goes?
Yeah,
Doesn't
in
matter by
being
using which
able,
tool.
well, like for what you were going through, that was an example of one API. And we could have an organization that has hundreds.
Correct. Correct. And that's a great question. And the answer is that's why I wanted to highlight the automation intelligence part. I just did one use case. Imagine you have hundreds of vendors,
Right.
hundreds of APIs, or perhaps thousands of APIs from those hundreds of vendors, because each vendor could provide you a handful of APIs. Then those thousands of APIs may have hundreds of thousands of agreements because each one of those will have one or two, at least two, three agreements. So now you can see that from a automation intelligence perspective, this is not manually solvable. We have to use AI. We have to use automation.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm not aware of all the commercial solutions. I played with
Sure.
ChatGPT. We have some solutions that we have in the TeejLab platform that everybody has access to, at least the audience that is there with us. Uh, are we done with that automation intelligence? The answer is no. There's a lot more needs to be done. For example, we could process all those agreements uh, and show where there are risks, what has changed, and whatnot. So you need those workflows to basically build an enterprise grade support for your organization.
Yeah.
But
And
chat,
that's kind of that's how I'm connecting the dots from what you're sharing.
right,
Because even the customers that get served where I'm at, a majority of them, this is all brand new.
I
And
agree.
so it's really starting with, like you shared, identifying what you have so you can then start to work on it, where as somebody begins to identify it, it they should know that it could end up being a deeper rabbit hole they're going down than what they initially find.
Right. And
And
your observation around this is a newer problem. Indeed, a lot of prospects and customers we talk to, some of those are customers, so they are now taking the help that they need. But
sure.
a lot of prospects I interact with, it just a they wake up to this aha moment. And this is definitely something that they did not think through, but now they have a open can of worm in front of them.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a good way of saying it. And, we'll learn a lot of time or see a lot of times, where people adjust in this sort of thing because either they felt pain directly or someone they know felt pain in what hit them in that impact, and they want to avoid that from happening themselves. But however they end up getting there, this is really the path forward to build this, and they have to understand that.
Mhm. All right, so still looks like there are no more questions, so maybe I can
Yeah.
move ahead with some take-home exercises. The take-home exercise, I'm keeping it really simple, which I described in my other workshops as well. So do the very first step where you can actually go under my actions and take action of claiming an API. So first you need to find something that is interesting enough for you so that you can investigate. Some of these APIs you see that they are vendors that somebody has already claimed. Many times it's me, but sometimes there are other people. But you can see that uh, from the previous sessions, we have some people claiming some APIs and whatnot. In one of the other exercises, people scan projects to do the due diligence. So, all these people, they conducted an application scan, surprisingly interesting aspect. So they scanned an application, they looked at what they found in those applications, maybe vendors and APIs and other related details. But this time I'm going to ask you this. So go under my actions as a take home exercise, go to a section called Claim New API. So click there. Under this section, you'll find a bunch of unclaimed APIs that you can investigate. So think of this as a forensic investigation. What you can do here is don't just click on any of these items. See if you can find something first that you want to investigate. But let's say you want to see, I don't know. I'm just gonna see if I can find something interesting. Let's say spot inst. I don't know what this is, spot inst. But I'm going to search here and say this is a vendor, API vendor. Now, when I searched it, it listed that vendor under unclaimed section because nobody has claimed this for investigation. So what you can do is you can see that there are no agreements attached to this. There is no other information like where it will be hosted, what kind of API it is. So you can claim this. When you claim this, it will ask you to review the vendor. Okay, so when you review the vendor, AI in the background is trying to find some information about this vendor. So you can see that it has found a link. So we can verify if that link actually works. So this might be the case that the vendor is actually not live because sometimes APIs show up, but they are dead the next day. So I did just a Google search. So I found some links. So I found this Spot Inst CN. So it looks like the website that okay, so I found this particular website and I don't know what do they do, but one flag that I see is they don't even have HTTPS. My browser is warning this is
Oh,
non-secure, but looks like a legitimate website. Maybe just that they don't have, oh, so they have moved to another website called Spot.io. So this is something where they have installed their certificate. So I can replace that. Let me close some of the other screens. So I can replace this link with this new link, and also maybe bring their logo. So I just drag and drop their logo here. Update. And now it is asking me to review two of their APIs. One is called Astro Digital version 2. I don't know what that means, but I can just review. So this might be related to some software services. And something to so once it is unknown, you can attach some category to this. Remember one of the slides where I said categorizing these APIs according to some classification will help you catalog your APIs in a better way. So we are just doing that. I just attached a category with this. I saved it. Now, after doing this small due diligence, I'm able to claim this vendor. So once I hit the claim, it will not allow you to claim the vendor until you provide those little pieces of information. Once you finish that, now you can make all the changes that you want to this particular vendor. For example, it did find actually agreement, but I don't know, that link was not valid. So I can go to their website. This is their actual website that I found after a little investigation. I can bring this terms of services there, this guy, and do the analysis in my portal there. Security, partner agreement. So there are a bunch of other agreements as well. So this is one of those agreements. I'm not sure if you can process the PDF version. Well, let's try. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit this and get rid of this one because this link did not work. So I'm going to give the link to that PDF agreement. And I'm going to call this, whatever they are calling that, is subscription agreement. So now you can see that under this, I've added this agreement, subscription agreement. So if I click there, it will take me to the original agreement, which is this guy. And let's see if I can also assess this. So sometimes the vendor may block or they may have technical issues letting us analyze their documents because they block it or it's a document format that we cannot read. But here I was able to read this and do a quick assessment on this agreement. So here I can see they're saying whatever their terms of conditions are, whatever the AI system perceives as a prohibition, it is asking us not to do with their APIs. That's listed here. But sometimes, there could be, you may not agree to these assessments. And that's your task. That's basically your task. So you play with it. There are a lot of other aspects, but once you complete this task, I will be able to monitor your activity here. As Tim, Dave, and I, we have a admin account, so we should be able to see who's doing what. And we will be able to provide you guidance if you need any guidance on the next steps. What additional things you can do is you can go under My Resources Learning Hub, and there are a bunch of videos that are recorded here that talk about different aspects of API governance, API management, API security, API development resources. So you can watch these videos to enrich your understanding and learning. And pretty much this is what I wanted to give as a take-home exercise. So I know some of you may get busier once you go leave the workshop, but I encourage you to continue to use the platform. This is something that you have subscribed to, you have access to. So I encourage you to try and use it and ask questions if you need to. Send us an email. I will share my general email address in a minute. But let me switch to my slide mode again. Okay, so I gave the home exercise. I showed the steps that you can do to conduct your analysis. So that's good enough as some steps that you can perform. Now let me summarize our final and fourth workshop. The very first part I discussed today was how the global enterprise API ecosystems are evolving. I gave you some examples from what is largest, what is the best in terms of API consumers. What are some of the uh, companies that provide API ecosystems that are very large, enabling innovations, partner enablement, community growth, and some interesting uh, insights. What are their use cases? Why they're building those APIs they built. We looked at various business risks. As much as you have advantage of monetizing your APIs, you have to be careful from a risk management perspective and be aware of how some of those APIs that you built could expose to various business risks to your organization. From a financial perspective, from a operational perspective, and obligations or reputational perspective. I also talked about the concepts of unknown APIs, which can be categorized into four main categories, which were shadow APIs, zombie APIs, rogue APIs, and essentially they are the root cause for the invisibility problem in your API ecosystem, and that's what causes challenges to your API governance program. Because for you to have the governance, at least you need to know the inventory. That's when you can govern. Then I talked about what are the basic foundations of your API governance program. And I summarized it in a very simplified way by saying that API governance is equal to your analytics plus actions. Analytics you need to draw from your discovery process, from gateways, from documentations. And I walked you through various analytics that you need. I shared top 10 analytics that you need to put your governance program. And then I also shared what are some of the actions you need to perform to put the governance in place. And I talked about the advantages, disadvantages of manual versus automated API governance uh, ways. Then I talked about how we can use AI and automated ways to uh, achieve the state of the art API governance programs. I shared examples from legal risk management and what kind of intelligence that can help us automate our API governance program. I share two examples from API discovery perspective, where you can use some model-based techniques, use some AI intelligence, agent-based techniques to discover APIs from your applications, from networks, from different environments, because that's your starting point. Then the second use case for intelligence and automation I discussed was the legal risk management part, where we can leverage upon NLP, natural language processing techniques, where we can assess these agreements using AI techniques. I showed two use cases, one using ChatGPT, one using TeejLab platform that you have access to. And I gave you the trade-offs where the assessments is very easy for you to do. But then I also talked about just the intelligence is not good enough. You need to automate it. You need to bring automation workflow engine into your enterprise API governance programs. And that pretty much summarizes our fourth workshop, which also touches upon three other workshops we conducted. One completely focused on security, another one focused on legal risk management. But today we touched upon the entire package. We touched upon all the different aspects of API governance, from the enterprise pain points to analytics to actions to intelligence and automation. If you want to do some of these things as a trial in a more professional way, you're welcome to reach out to us and give us the opportunity. We'll be happy to discuss with you if you need to do this separately from this workshop. But again, if you want to continue to learn on the platform just for your enrichment purposes, you have access to the platform. This is my contact detail. Of course, you have the contact details of Dave and Tim as well. They are the admins of the TeejLab platform account that is exclusive for ISACA members. I encourage you to leverage upon that and make use of those um, accesses that we have given to ISACA members. And feel free to send questions and give us reason to talk to you. So with that note, once again, thank you everyone for joining me today, and Dave and Tim. And thanks again, Dave and Tim, for making this possible for you, for us, and the entire chapter members. Very thankful that you made us part of your community. We are honored. We are very glad that we were able to share our knowledge and understanding. And we are happy to come back next time again. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Baljeet. This has been a fantastic, just whole series, each workshop after the other. I'll drop the link in the chat again for anybody, because we have recorded the first three workshops. We're recording this one. We will get it posted. But anybody will have access to the whole series through that link right there. And Baljeet, if I can get a copy of the slide deck, that's okay for public distribution, I'll add that on there as well.
Yeah, happy to do that. I need to do some cleanup. As you can see, I had some rough slides, my working notes. But give me a day or two. I will clean up my slides and send it over.
Okay. No, this is great. Thank you. And to everybody online, like Baljeet said, this is the last workshop, but that doesn't mean the communication needs to end. Feel free to reach out to Tim and I or Baljeet directly for any questions or guidance or anything that we can help with. But in the spirit of what Tim and I and the rest of the chapter leadership, it's all about trying to find and share quality information, and everything you share here is so relevant, so needed, so very much appreciated.
I would point out, right, that everyone should remember they have the community license for free to learn on, number one. Number two, Baljeet showed there's all kinds of videos to get practice on, and they should know that the chapter has a number of advanced, full-blown TeejLab licenses. Should any of these participants want to take a step further.
Yes. Yeah, Jasdeep, this one on the link up above, if you just look up a little bit, you'll see the link where we've put recordings of the first three workshops, and we'll be adding this one on there as well. Should be up later this week. Cool. So if anybody online does have any questions, this would be the last chance to fire them our way, or we can go ahead and wrap. But again, thank you, Baljeet, and thank you, Tim, as well, for all the help and time that you've put in towards supporting people getting signed up and everything else that you've done to help.
Well, thanks again, Dave and Tim, for bringing this workshop for this chapter. So very thankful. I really enjoyed this whole series, and looking forward to staying in touch.
Yeah. Now we can strategize on what's next.
That'll be great.
Well, I think there are possibilities for other sessions. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cool. Okay. Well, we'll let everybody go. I know it's late it's coming up on 8 out here. So anybody in a different time zone, thank you even more for sticking around.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Cool.
Bye-bye.
Thanks again.
Okay, guys.
Bye.
See you later.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Tim. Thank you, Dave. Bye-bye.